And we're going to have some fun this evening with Ricki Weible, who's going to talk to us a lot about the shenanigans, which we're not allowed to speak of, and hope this channel doesn't get a mark or banned, because some of what we're going to discuss tonight is forbidden knowledge, forbidden questions about what just happened in the last election infection in Minnesota. And we're really still hoping to have you here live with us. Of course, it's such a long a boat ride and a drive from your undisclosed location there in the South Pacific. I'm just guessing you're in Guam right now, but we don't need to, you know, we're going to drop a lot of facts tonight, and it's going to be entertaining and fun. And for those of you who are used to being infantilized and treated like children by the mainstream media and our politicians on the left and the right, buckle your seatbelts because we're in for a bumpy ride tonight. Mr. Ricki Weible, can you please tell us, what did we just live through?
Well, you know, it's kind of like 2020 literally said, this is going to be the best year ever. And then 2021 came along and said, hold my beer. But as for the election, you know, this is one of those things that I have to have a little bit of a parental disclaimer here. So those of you who are 16 years and under, please leave the room. It's not safe for them to hear this, because I really hope by the time they turn 18, we have all this fixed, so we can get rid of this dystopian nightmare. And I promise today, we're really not going to really get into the weeds. Too late. We're already there. So we might as well just go ahead and get into it and really kind of unpack what really happened in the election this year. And it's, I mean, you hear these stories all over, and it's like, what do you believe? And I got to say, you have to almost believe it all, because that's the only way that you make sense of it, is that it is 2020. It's crazy. And there's some kind of interesting facts as you kind of unpack the numbers. So, for example, I believe in Minnesota, you know, north of 6,000 people have so far died of COVID. That's not the real danger. Did you realize that the people who registered in September of 2020, 11,000 of those voters have already been removed from the voter rolls? I can only assume that they died.
So what else happened to them? Why else would they have been removed? I don't know. Maybe others took their places from the 18th century.
Allegedly. But when you look at the data, all you can do is just kind of throw up your hands and just laugh. And so when we sit here and we look at the election, it's literally unbelievable, where we think this is how it works, and then we find out how it really works. So when we started out looking at some of the information, it was like, okay, let's take you on a little bit of a timeline journey here. November 3rd was kind of the important day, right? Well, not really. You know, in Minnesota, there's actually 46 days of voting.
Yeah. Election day was another one of the holidays, or the election day was another traditional civic day experience, which had to be disappeared down the ancient memory hole, right? And we have this election year, literally election year. So
don't encourage them. Don't encourage them. They can barely handle the 46 days and get it done in a timely manner. So when we sit here and we think about it, it's like you have these expectations up here, and what really happened is, I don't know, I can't find it. It's somewhere down there. Yeah, the best analogy would be like, imagine if those of you in your audience that have cats, I would never have a cat because they're total jerks, right? So you put up all these nice little things around your house, and what's a cat do? Jump up and just knock them down, right? That's kind of how I feel with my views on voting and kind of election integrity. And I'm actually going to use a strong word like election integrity, because when you sit here and you look at this tight timeline of, okay, November 3rd, let's just all agree that that's actually the election day. Let's just imagine that world.
Yeah. Okay.
Then, okay, and then we somehow have all these volunteers from both parties. Actually, I got to be careful there. So how many major parties do you think we actually have in Minnesota?
Well, there's supposedly two, I
Oh,
thought, but I guess there might be three.
oh, you're close. I can understand why you would actually say three, because two of them are actually pod parties, and it's hard to distinguish anyway. So there's actually, so I'm going to give you credit there. So, and so when we look at the law, it actually kind of has an impact. So if major parties are supposed to have the seat at the table to be able to review the entire election process, and the law says kind of two major parties, you could literally have two major pot parties in both the DFL and the Republicans sitting outside kind of going, can we come in? Can we come take a look at what's happening?
Right.
Because the law says we don't have to.
Yeah. Start to finish, there wasn't much observation. And then we had to bash down the doors to allow, the other side of the unit party to come in and watch. And then in the end, when the alleged audit was finally called for by Jennifer Carnahan, people were still kept 15 feet back from the signature cards and the ballots. So nothing was determined via the audit.
Right. And so, as we sit here and we kind of, dream about our future, and we look to the heavens and kind of figure that the gods have this whole thing all figured out for us, we kind of find out, yeah, that's not true. And I kind of believe we want better. That's kind of the whole point of this thing. And there's through this whole journey, there's been kind of some remarkable lessons. I think I would have rather watched sausage being made than unpacking this whole election process, because there's times where even today I found out some more information and it's not a finished product and I feel really sick. And it's still not done. That's the thing. So you're kind of like, well, move on. What do you mean by that? Okay, so November 3rd is that important date. Then we have that other important date. This is where all the work is supposed to be done. This is where the state canvassing board meets and says, yep, we trust everything that you've given us, county auditors and Secretary of State Steve Simon. Let's see what you got. And so Steve Simon presents the report, and that canvassing board puts the seal of approval on it and says, there you go, we have an election, here are all our winners, right? Well, I get a data update directly from the Secretary of State's office, and I look at it, and this thing is November 29th. And I'm saying, there's no way. There is no way this could be true. But it is. 38.9% of the voting history was not connected to a registered voter.
38.9% of the voting history was not connected to a registered voter.
Right. So, and here's where the big asterisk comes in. It's actually allowed by law. So, so it's kind of like turning in a term paper without any of the scientific evidence to it and telling the professor, that's my conclusion, but I don't actually have to give you the actual results until December 15th, statutorily. Here's where the second asterisk comes in. Because of that, we actually run into an issue where Secretary of State Steve Simon had extended the deadline all the way until January 12th. So this is kind of like the call into the professor to literally say, my dog ate my paper, or I have the and even though it's 2 weeks isolation, give me a month. So it's like,
so it's the election that never ends, and
right.
And the diffusion of responsibility, the diffusion of the participatory side of it just vanishes, right? So
Right.
the numbers are just FUD. We're not allowed to say election fraud anymore, because we're supposed to say that was totally fine what they did.
Yeah, and I kind of want to argue that a little bit, because I'm a data guy, and being in technology, it's like simple electricity. the light switch works or it's off, 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 on. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're certifying an election on November 24th, but yet I don't really have to turn in my homework until January 12th. And even at this point on the 29th, I'm missing 39 or 38.9% of the data. So let's think about this logically. December 12th, or sorry, December 2nd is an important date in Minnesota as well. That is the last date that you can actually file a court case to challenge an election and the election results.
Oh. So if the results aren't given prior to that date, you can't file a court challenge to the results.
Right. So
perfect.
So in essence, I can't prove that there's issues because I don't have all the data. So could I legitimately say you can't prove that everything is on the up and up because you didn't show your work.
Right. And you can't prove otherwise, so it becomes a moot point.
Right.
In terms of the data that you have seen, are there any irregularities? I mean, does the Secretary of State of Minnesota know how many ballots were sent out altogether? Do we have an accurate count of how many absentee ballots, mail-in ballots were sent out versus people who participated in pop-up voting and drive-by voting and walk-in?
They do through a couple of methods. And so one of the ways is based upon the system that they have, which is in a separate area of the voter database, where they actually track when a voter comes in and requests an absentee ballot. They actually track when they send it out. They track when that ballot comes back in, and then they track when that ballot is accepted. That's another little story. And that's a point of contention that we can talk about later as well.
Oh.
So yeah, they actually have really good statistics on that part. And not everybody that requests a ballot actually sends it in. And that's okay, because some people may change their mind to kind of go, yeah, you know, I'm kind of unsure and maybe I'm just going to show up to vote, you know, as a legitimate reason. Or they just decide, you know, my candidate's really not the superstar I thought they were. And so maybe I'm just going to do a hard pass. People have different reasons. It happens. Or, you know, they get sick, or it just becomes not important. Or they had to travel, you know, so, or they just lost it. But
they might have sold it.
Huh?
Or they might have sold it.
I'm not going to go there, but.
No, I know. Never mind. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there, but, you know, it's like, but, you know, for whatever reason, that's fine. But overall, it's just phenomenal to me that when there's plain language in the law in handling the absentee ballots. So most of the absentee ballots are supposed to come back 7 days before the start of the election is kind of the rule. And when we look at the law, it says that through these different steps in dealing with the absentee ballots, they must be immediately entered in. And so it was surprising that when they receive a ballot, that we don't see the voting histories updated at the same time. Because if they're accepted, why are we waiting for another step? You know, it's just, it doesn't make sense.
Oh.
So, and that's a possibility. I have no idea. So there's groups of people that have legitimate questions surrounding the data based upon some of the research that I've done, as well as some other folks that I've talked to that have done independent research, and they're all kind of going, this isn't this, are you getting this too? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And it's like, this is not a way to run a database. And I'm like, I know. It's like, I'm not comfortable with a 38.9% fumble, you know, of missing data.
Yeah, that's 38 sounds slightly better than 38.9, by the way.
Yeah,
so,
38.
So nearly 40. Like if you went to the next higher integer, if you went to 40% of missing data would sound a lot worse than 38.9. It's like, oh, 38.9, that sounds like a deal. But 40, you know, you're 1 point away from, you're 1.1% away from 40, which really would say Gee, that's nearly half, right? It's
Or,
because 38.9 is much more than a third.
well, you're being generous. So let me
I'm
put
being
it
generous,
this
but
way.
that's why, products will be priced at $1.99 because nobody likes the sound of $2.
Right. So let's put it this another way. So an A grade is typically 90. Some schools are stricter at 95%. A B grade is typically 80%. A C grade is usually 70%. A D grade, well, or
60.
grade, whatever you're at, usually is in
Yeah.
that 50 percentile. So we're literally at a failing rate. I mean, or barely meeting expectations. I mean, it's just like, I don't think that's what we really want. And so when I sat here and I looked at this database and I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally get it. There's two possibilities here. Number one, it explains the failure for the launch of the Obamacare website in the state of Minnesota, MNsure, and it also explains MNLARS. They're consistently terrible at developing databases and maintaining them.
Reliably bad.
Or maybe I need to change my view, and according to Common Core, this is actually the way things are working. I should just be comfortable with it.
Everybody gets a participation trophy. Right.
Right.
Well, it's astonishing to think that we'd be satisfied with, Chomsky famously said that governments need to manufacture consent. But in this case, they haven't even succeeded in manufacturing consent. They're not collecting enough of the electorate's preferences to gauge in any way what it is the electorate is saying. So elections may have consequences, but we don't see those. It's the people who count the votes that matter, not the people who voted.
Right. And we sit here and we look at this, our expectations are high. I mean, this is the voting of the elections. In reality, I really think we actually got that. And, as we go down the trail of the election history, it's not good. And we really have to make some changes here. And when we sit here and we look at all of the different things that have happened, we cannot accept this. It's just not acceptable. We deserve better than this. And our government deserves to give us transparency and straight answers. And we need time to digest this. When Governor Walz talks about, we need to come together, we need to be one Minnesota. Okay, well, let's do that. Prove it. Let's have an honest conversation about what happened in the election, and let's actually review the election law. Here's an interesting one for you. So this is actually allowed by law. Did you know that you yourself can actually vouch for up to 8 people within your precinct?
I didn't know that.
Okay. Or how about this one? Did you realize that if you lived in an apartment, say it's 24 units, and the apartment manager lived on site, they could vouch for 8 people. But if the apartment manager lived in another city, not in your precinct, they can't vouch for you.
Huh.
Or how about this one? This is an interesting one. Did you know that a nurse who works at a care facility taking care of our elderly, whether it's grandma or mom or dad, at a nursing home facility, they can vouch for all of the residents there?
Oh, amazing. Is that even the ones who are under care of or who are wards of the state, or have their property, their life in trust?
I'd have to look a little bit further on some of those, because some of those have nuances, but definitely specifically like the ones that are dementia care patients, or even labeled as Alzheimer's care areas. We noticed in the data under further review that in some pockets, there were some extremely high participation rates.
Huh.
And when we looked in other parts of the state, it wasn't that high. And so we could definitely see that nurses were definitely playing a role in helping people to vote. And I have a real issue with that. So my mother-in-law is an Alzheimer's patient, and she's over in South Dakota. where she's getting great care. And I really don't want to have a nurse to have a duality of conflict, because the nurse's primary responsibility is to actually take care of the patients under their care. I don't want a nurse sitting there trying to help out a patient, trying to fill out a ballot, and then all of a sudden there's an alarm down the hallway that they need to basically take care of somebody. It's not, there's no other profession that has that duality of responsibility when it comes to election law. What are we doing? And it's not even laughable, but that's a serious part of it. So in reality, it's like, so you're telling me that a nurse who doesn't live on site has the ability to vouch for everybody in that facility, but an apartment manager can't vouch for the people who pay him or her rent and the units they manage.
Huh. I saw an election. I saw a situation where a manager from a local store stood in the voting facility and vouched for virtually every member of his community, his particular group, every member of his community who walked in to vote at that site. And he's simply a manager from a store in the area, but anyone who was a member of his community, and he did it with multiple people for over a period of hours. So it was more than 8. But this is just who's going to enforce that, because both parties don't have eyes on the ground, and it seems some of the election employees may be fearful of actually doing the right thing. They have to become whistleblowers or something to get anything done. They don't want to do that.
Right. And and it's a hard position to put them into. And so, I mean, it's interesting. It's almost laughable. So when I'm sitting here watching the Minnesota Department of Health tell Minnesotans that they need to go register on a website to be able to get a immunization shot for the that's happening around Minnesota, and they're going to have to show up with ID. I'm like, they're racist. They're literally racist, because they've told us that they continue to denigrate the inner city by saying that, well, they can't get ID. So wait a minute here. So for something that could literally kill them, you're going to put a barrier in front of them to require ID, but when it comes to voting, that's okay. And we're going to basically denigrate an entire segment of the population. I'm sorry, but that's disgusting.
Yeah, it really doesn't wash, does it?
No, it doesn't wash. And when I talked about kind of like some of the deadlines, so remember that December 15th deadline that was earlier? So I've got another statistics, so it's like they're supposed to enter in all these voting histories. We actually have a county that completely nailed it. I can vouch for this county and say they did their job. I'm proud of them. And they are actually the only county that got the work done before the state canvassing board. Just out of 87. One. There's always the one. So when we sit here, we look, so I'll show you this other little slide here where it actually, you can see Chippewa County, they completed it on November 16th. So we know it's possible. And then we had the section there failed beyond expectations. Dodge County completed theirs on February 4th. And then Fillmore County in southeastern Minnesota, they're still not done. So those two counties actually couldn't even complete it before the extended deadline.
So I'm noticing here that a lot of these deadlines are in December.
Yes.
I mean, they finished their work after Christmas, New Year's, in the new year in 21. How did we have a winner in November if the work isn't done until 2 months later?
Yeah, this is where it gets really funny, and seriously, that's where the joke is seriously on the voter. And so when you sit here and you look at, if we were going to try to do any type of election review, how could I appropriately audit the addresses for the voters in Hennepin County when I don't have complete records until literally the end of the year?
Is there an advantage to some party or some individual for having such a chaotic system where the records don't exist? I mean, does this enable the government to never have a legitimate election by saying, oh, we're just, we'll get it right next time and kick the can down the road? I mean, presumably this has been going on for a while.
This is the worst year. It's been getting progressively worse. As we add more technology, it's getting worse, not better.
Yeah.
And what's frustrating is they had additional money coming to elections from both the federal and the state. And literally the legislature in Minnesota went to Steve Simon and said, whatever you want, you're going to get. Steve Simon presented a bountiful list of things that he needed. And they did a wonderful request of PPE. They did a great job of protecting the employees during the election. They did a great job of making sure that everybody was able to cast a ballot. As far as I know, I don't know of any voter in Minnesota that wanted to vote that couldn't vote. I haven't heard anything, negative part of that. So that part they absolutely succeeded in. But on the back end, they absolutely failed. And it's unacceptable. I mean, just logic, you can't certify an election in, I would say, a handshake law of gentlemen scholars, or even just the word of your mom, to say, you know what, we can absolutely trust this election because all the work was done and they certified the election with a full knowledge and full data aspect that any point in time, a member of that state canvassing board could have said, you know what, I want to just do a quick audit of this particular precinct. I want to make sure that everything is there. They couldn't have done it because the work wasn't done.
So it seems that the fluidity of this data and all these data points is rendered mathematically like a model which is emblematic, or the northern lights behind you are emblematic and fluid. This data just is amorphous.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. And so and what's funny is it's still morphing. So you would think that they're still adding people to the voter histories, but at the same time, they're removing voters from the election rolls. So what's happened is I've actually seen, I'm just kind of get my notes here. So on November 29th, when we're missing 39% of the vote, then the next data set I get is December 13th, and I'm missing about 6.25% of the vote. Then on December 20th, I'm missing about 1%. And then on December 27th, I'm missing 0.96% of the vote. And on January 31st, I'm missing 1.2% of the vote. So now I'm starting to get more of the creep, because now they're starting to remove the dead voters. And that's funny because, as I said earlier, it's like, I believe the COVID statistics right now, I'll show this up on the screen for you. This is live as of today. According to the state of Minnesota Department of Health website, there are 6,081 confirmed COVID deaths. But the new registered voters in September 2020, there's been 11,876 folks removed, and the people that registered in October 2020, 7,567 of those folks were removed. So I'm not sure what to make of that. If voting is an indication that you're going to probably have death faster than COVID, or what that means.
Or not having voted, or somehow COVID is the cause of a lot of death these days. Maybe it's the cause of a lot of voting irregularities too, it seems, this year. Was
Right.
that possibly keeping everybody home because of COVID? Did that exacerbate things because we didn't have an election day? We had an election 6 months or 9 months or whatever it was.
So the 46 days of voting, that's allowed statutorily. However, the big issue with this is that it scared a lot more people to vote from home. And luckily, we had that option. There could have been more creativity by the precincts to do drive-in voting, for example. We learned a lot with social distancing. People were able to shop just fine at grocery stores and Walmart and Lowe's and Home Depot. And I don't see how voting could have been any different. We're hardy Minnesotans. We love the outdoors, and
We socially distance naturally as well.
yeah, we kind of do.
Yeah.
um,
Let's take a break to the first. I mean, finish that point, and then we'll call an end to part one here, so we don't go
yeah,
over 2 minutes here.
and so there was a real opportunity to get creative. And so one of the cities that I had worked with, I even suggested that they could do drive-in voting. They had money from the CARES Act to literally just buy those Costco 10 by 10 tents and just allow people to drive in underneath those, put the voting machine right there, and they could just slide it in after they're done voting in their cars. So there was a lot of opportunity for creativity, and businesses certainly did. And they were able to keep a lot of us safe. Otherwise, we would have had tremendous spikes. And so that's where I have to give credit to a lot of the businesses out there that did do the right thing. And we certainly had the opportunity to. And I sit here and I look at the data, and we didn't as election officials.
It seems that since the government has our social security numbers and taxes us very efficiently, there should be a way to link your voting record to your IRS record and prove therefore that you have a better right to vote and that you're only voting one time. So with that, let's take a brief break and we'll resume in a moment. Thank you very much.